Hello and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Adi Achint. Today I'm proud to have with me Colonel Rohit Dev, who's going to talk to us about various geopolitical and military based affairs surrounding India today. He is an alumni of the Defense Services Staff College, Wellington, after about a service of 24 years in the mechanized infantry. Thank you so much for joining me today, sir. And
Thank you, Adi.
we look forward for some of your opinions about various different subjects that we're going to talk about. So, may I, sir, begin with the questioning? It's a general question at a very broad base. Militarily speaking, sir, where do you see the warfighting capabilities of India today, especially looking after looking out of on towards our left and right, that is basically our the Chinese and the Pakistanis, creating quite a bit of rift on our borders. How do you see us faring up to them?
Adi, if I am very candid with you towards the Chinese side, I would say that we are 3 decades behind. We were 3 decades behind, in my assessment, militarily, when the last year began and when the skirmishes started happening. And with Pakistan, I think we are much ahead. And unfortunately, in the military realm, we have put too much of bias on Pakistan to try and show that we are superior and we will prevail. And while that is the case, but I think it's a case of an overkill. So what has happened in the last few decades is that our resource building, our accretion of forces, our raising of units has been primarily biased more towards the Western theater.
Mm.
And as a result, the North and Northeast theater has been a little sluggish when compared to the Chinese buildup. The other thing, what geopolitically wrong we have done is that we have given enough room to China to come upon the Tibetan plateau and create that additional elbow space, which has been seeking for the last about 2.5, 3 decades. And watching China grow in terms of infrastructure, in terms of getting its railroad communications right up till the LAC in certain sectors and in certain places a little short, we actually have given advantage to China. Even as a geopolitical signaling by calling TAR what it is something which has been a giveaway from our side, which shouldn't have happened. But purely militarily, today, as I see it, we are quite well poised, Adi, to take care of both the threats. And if you understand the terrain and more so the climate change which happens, for example, primarily we look at the fronts to open up with Pakistan traditionally during the seasons which are beyond the monsoons and say they are winter season. So these are the seasons when traditionally the LAC is closed. It has snowed and there is no movement feasible. So this kind of alternate climatic zones available for us to operate gives us today the bandwidth to pick up a lot of reserve units, primarily from the northern and the western theater, and be able to apply it against the LAC during the months of summer. And that is something which progressively you will see happening in our country. Next 5 to 7 years, like I have stated many times since last year, are critical because advantage remains with China to come at will at points of decision which it chooses. Whereas for us, it is mostly a reactive kind of a situation, barring a few places. One of them we took advantage of an initiative to go and occupy this year. That was near Moldo, Blacktop. Similarly, there are places which are to our advantage, and I think plain vanilla, what is required is that infrastructure should be developed in the next 5 7 years to a degree that our forces and our build-up can take place at a time frame which is acceptable. Today, the mobilization differential between the two countries are not in our favor insofar as China is concerned, because China takes less time to mobilize and come onto the front. Whereas the mob differential vis-a-vis Pakistan, it's to our advantage because of our creation of these offensive defense formations along the border and the greater depth being given to us both in the northern theater with the creation of RR and other units, and also in the western theater, our second tier of mechanized forces are also echeloned quite nearer to the borders today. So if I see it holistically, there is no reason to panic per se, but with a evident mindset and also the will to ensure that the due force accretions take place in next 5 to 7 years. I'm not alluding to any mountain core or such like things. It can be purely, orchestrated in terms of a combat group gearing, because we are not a very cash-rich nation which can create such infrastructures overnight. And certain amount of Western theater elements, like you saw the last summers, were picked up the mechanized forces and sent to Depsang and other areas, including Pyeongso. These are the forces which are also available to interact today. The air buildup, which is in our favor, both it can react simultaneously to the northern and the western theater, is an asset which needs to be also built up. But apart from this, Adi, which we generally look at the two adversaries, what more is required that India will have to play a little meaningful role in the overall geopolitics and be able to, I will not say ally militarily completely, but have options open for some kind of a cooperation in all realms. Military being one of them, it is not the major one today. The economic part is much more, and there are other areas of cooperation which you can develop. You've seen how Quad is coming up,
Yes.
and while Japan, because of its insecurities, wants it to be a military alliance as of yesterday, probably. But the other nations are a little, slow on that. But somehow, this picking up of Quad in the last 1 year is a signal that India is willing to make friends and allies. And this is something which we have traditionally, sort of avoided,
Correct.
right, through the non-aligned movement. And we said that we will keep aloof and we'll be separate. It hasn't worked out. It hasn't worked out because in the world order, if you want to have something to your advantage, you have to contribute. And military contribution has to be a facet which we need to look at. And that is where the Indian Navy, whether you want to control Pakistan or China, the string of pearls, the sea routes, or during adversity, look at the way you look at traditionally Pakistan through the naval deployments. Apart from that, we need to look at South China Sea. We need to look at Indo-Pacific, and we need to develop even a navy. But navy can take time. What threat you are talking about is Pakistan, China. So 5 to 7 years, the army force accretions and the air force accretions are more important. But in the realm of 15, 20 years, the 2 decades from now, you have to plan now, because submarines and aircraft carriers can't be built in a day. So you have to plan accordingly, and it has to be a holistic kind of a thought, which we must give as a nation. And I'm quite sure people are aware of it, aware to it now and alive to it. And what has taken us by surprise since Doklam should not, happen to our nation in the next few years, and that is the criticality, Adi.
I think that's the bottom line. I mean, that's going to be very reassuring that we will not be surprised again, because I guess one time surprise, second time coincidence, third time we can call ourselves fools if we are not going to predict that. And but the Chinese came within all their furor and did a lot of positioning and did a lot of wordplay, if I may use the phrase. There was a lot of action there was a lot of action that took place, of course, in the Galwan Valley. Things did get heated up. There were a couple of bullets fired in the air. This and that happened. What was their entire motive, and why did they suddenly go back? And what is your opinion about this whole disengagement thing that has happened, although in just one sector currently? But how do you see this? How do you see this going forward?
Adi, just let me take you back by about two decades now, and one was very alive to the Chinese, structuring of their forces and military regions that time. And you have seen how the amalgamation of the two, Langzhou and the other one, Chengdu, has taken place to create a, kind of a Western theater. When you look at China, Adi, one of the things is, how do I put it very, rudimentally to you? Okay, so you're sitting on a dining table, right? And that's a bad habit. People say that you put your elbows on table, right? So you're creating sort of elbow space from the left and right in the front. The Chinese have got this, nasty habit, and a very structured and a very measured one at that, to create elbow space. So if you look at the tri-junctions which India shares with China, all 4 or 5 of them, right till Myanmar, all these tri-junctions where the borders meet are the points where China has to create an elbow space to remain relevant and to safeguard its interests and assets which it will finally create in the Tibetan region. So if you see from the last 2 decades, what China has been able to do in a very guile manner is that they've been able to build up a lot of infrastructure coming into Tibet. And now to say that China will forego all that is actually pretty naive.
Mm.
So it's just a measure that on the eastern side, touching Nepal, China has come, say, as close as to the border as possible. But on the western side, when you go towards the Siachen and beyond towards the Xinjiang province area, they are a little farther away from the LAC right now. So they are into the hinterland of Tibet. But gradually they are coming forward. So the
Yes.
5 airports or the seventh airport now being made and airfields being made, they're all edging forward. And so is that Lhasa Kikingai Tibet railway line going more westwards. So as they do that, I'm quite sure that their military assets will also come into a forward deployment mode. And to assume that what has happened last year will not happen will not be a true military assessment. In fact, as per a military assessment, what happened in Galwan was a prodding action. The prodding action had two aims in mind. One was a military aim in mind to see what kind of actions and reactions we can curate in that short period of time.
Mm.
And sufficiently enough, we created enough for this time, and we also were able to, position our strategic reserves into that theater this time, which China was not very sure of that is going to happen. But by doing so, what we have done is that we have given Pakistan also a very good intelligence that these are the kinds of units which can be picked up in case we are facing towards China in the summers. So if Pakistan has to have an advantage of a dateline timeline beyond the actual campaigning seasons of winters, Pakistan will be at an advantage to at least gauge those numbers correctly today. But having said that, those numbers are not in Pakistan's favor. So I think that will be out of the context for now that Pakistan will assume anything. But insofar as China is concerned, the second aim was that there was too much of pressure post this COVID outbreak, and China sees India as a very well-defined economic threat. Although India does not state in so many terms on a public platform like China or doesn't use its media like Global Times or CGTN, but we are able to do a lot through our cooperation with countries across the world. And that is an advantage which China doesn't want India to gain further. I'll give you a small example before I just proceed on the military part. You see how we have made two vaccines and we are trying to woo the world and trying to give it as gift and tomorrow sell it also. It's a multi-million billion dollar industry for years to come because COVID doesn't go anywhere.
Mm.
And those vaccines are going to be sold worldwide. Whereas at the same time, the Chinese vaccine, I don't know, Sinovac or what the name is, that vaccine is taking a hit worldwide. The Americans are not approving of it, the Europeans are not approving of it, and certainly India doesn't need it, right? So these are the small brickbats which China thinks can get India into the economic surge, which will also give an impetus to the military surge of India, similar to the coin which China has been playing for last 2 decades by fooling the WTO and other people to take all economic advantages and on the guile of economic activity, being able to promote the military advantage for themselves.
Mm.
And that is where China feels threatened. And China felt threatened not once, they felt threatened twice. When Doklam happened, and what got us to Doklam was sheer our relationship with a lovely, neighbor. But China took lessons from there. And post that, if you remember 2019, if I'm not wrong, September, somewhere there, India boasted of a exercise, Changthang, right?
Mm.
And we tried to show our prowess in the area of Ladakh, Leh Ladakh, that time. And when that exercise was happening in 2019, and I made a commentary to some of my friends and older colleagues in the veteran community, I said, next day you will have Chinese incursion, which you will have to face. And a lot of people told me that time that it's a very naive thought. And initially, when the incursions did happen in the summers of 2020, a lot of commentators on television who came, very senior army commanders and retired chiefs and all, they said it is just a normal patrolling thing. They have come, they will go back. But I said they're not going to go back, and they're here for a long haul. And the least they will do is try and tire us out and see our responses for the full season this time, because Doklam was a little short in terms of duration. So if I am the enemy and if I have the advantage of the mobilization differential to come to the territories where I want to come, and if I want to gauge you, I will go to places and test you for that without creating a huge uproar about it. What happened in Galwan was a little different, Adi, and what has come in the media is absolutely fair to say that our braves were led into an ambush they were not prepared for, and it's not that they were not prepared for fighting; they were not prepared for the kind of the barbaric tone that encounter took initially from the Chinese side. But let me tell you, we are not kids in the kindergarten, and we had done enough that time, and a lot of number countings was going on, same like Balakot this time, which was such a poor commentary on our polity, and also some in the military as veterans who were trying to justify the Chinese action and probably play our game a little lower. But all has come to the fore and record now to say that we did well in that particular encounter and that fight. But before that fight, Adi, something else would have happened probably. Probably when we meet over a cup of coffee next time, personally, I will remember this and I will tell you. So we are no kids in a kindergarten. Just remember this, and we gave them before Galwan, and we gave them during Galwan in more than equal measure. And that was some lesson which the Chinese did not expect, because they had deployed troops from other territories who were not the regular troops there. They were initially brought on the mid of June
Yeah.
to sort of take out some kind of a what do you call uh, what can I say, setback they must have faced a few days ago at our hands, and it didn't play up very well for them. But when you talk about disengagement, now disengagement is not surely coming from our military prowess, Adi. Our military prowess did so much to occupy some ground which was quite tactically or operationally relevant at that time. It put the Chinese at a disadvantage. Our mobilization of the forces and the effort we put in, and also we continued with our infrastructure, gave China a lesson that we are not going to stop at it, right? So we are not a country that you just because you came. See, it could be a very good decoy, right? To come to an area, you create a small intrusion or a incursion, and you create some situation which is flagged by the media, and then you expect as a bargaining chip that the Indians will not do infrastructure development. That has been their, so-called modus operandi for the last few decades. This time, it hasn't worked at all. So not only under fire or a threat of fire, we continued. The border roads did a fantastic job, and they're still continuing. And this is something which China did not measure at all. In terms of the disengagement, it is primarily due to a lot of geopolitical pressure and the economics of it.
Mm.
And you and me may not be privy to what goes backstage in the economic realm or the geopolitical realm otherwise. But I certainly sense that the progress which we have tried to show and showcase, and the kind of support we have garnered. Now, when you talked about the South China Sea fiasco which China did, you saw that the support which came to us at that time for our actions at Galwan and beyond, unequivocal, a call from the French to say that we'll support you in case of a war. That was kind of a statement which came around from France, and subtle statements came from the president of the US that time, and more so, there were a lot of other friends, including Israel and Australia and Japan, who supported us a lot that time. So when you see now where China stands in terms of economic isolation, it is a threat, a live threat to China today. It sees that it has to do more to come back to normalcy in terms of economic engagements. If it fails to do that, or even if it drops by say 10%, 20% of its economic might worldwide, it's a huge setback, because all its plan for growth, and it's primarily the growth of its military, which by 2050 it had a different dream to achieve, or maybe 2032, the initial white paper, it will not be able to achieve. So China is threatened economically more. Geopolitically, the favors which our country has carried in the last 8 9 months, and then the kind of resolve we have shown militarily, and the decision making as the government of the day has done, is something which China was not attuned to. China was attuned to that if they do a skirmish, India will come into a huddle and they will talk politely. They will throw some bargaining chip at us and we'll grab it and we'll keep quiet thereafter. It has actually not happened this time. So right from the media frenzy, right from sort of a back channel media campaign, which they are very apt by putting money and throwing money into, right from New York Times to some weird newspapers in our country. They tried all that. They tried all that, and that is one arm of China. And if you see, Adi, something which for nearly 2 decades Pakistan has done against us. So all the money Pakistan got, most of it never went for anybody's welfare in Pakistan. It went for the cause of creating a commotion in Kashmir, and to support that, the propaganda machinery, right from buying diplomats to press to anybody else who mattered, right from the headquarters of UN in the Paris, in UN in US, to anybody else in the Scandinavian countries where they write a lot of literature on human rights. Pakistan had a distinct advantage, and it is now in the last few years. And when Syed Akbaruddin was the head at the UN, you saw the way he dealt with Pakistan, and we have continued the way Maila, what was the lady's name? Lodi, Maliha Lodi, or somebody from
Yeah.
Pakistan,
Yes.
who had been their representative for many years. So she felt the heat, and then she was taken off. And I believe our diplomatic, aggressiveness has been very coy, but subtle and very forceful. Right? We don't make noises on the air, but what we do backdoor, or what we do on a platform which matters when we commit ourselves to a particular thing, is something which is quite heartening. And these things are the ones which have set the stage for this sort of a disengagement. And I will not call it a disengagement which is going to survive for long.
Mm.
You will find that there will be these sporadic kind of intrusions and incursions, as you may call it, will happen again, and may happen this year itself. And next 5-7 years are something which we need to look at. And if you actually look at the areas where disengagement is a question mark, is something like a Debsang plane.
Mm.
If you look at it, 2013, 2015, and since then 6 more years have passed. And whatever is the strategic nature of that particular area for us in terms of being a sandwich between Siachen and Tibet, India has to be very sure that at no point of time you leave these strategic terrain, areas. I will not say key terrain. Key terrain is a military tactical term. There are certain areas where you should not be weak at all.
Mm.
So when we were coming back and pulling back our mechanized columns from Pagangso and other areas, one was a little wary as a veteran, and I espouse my faith in the system to say that okay, they must have taken it into account. So I spoke to a few people who matter in the decision making at the topmost level, whom I know personally as well, and they reiterated that behind all this, we have measured the distance, we measured the time, and we are very confident that we will not be surprised. So that is something which I'm so happy that politically and militarily together, a decision has been taken like that, because sort of a poor pullback and saying all MEC forces go back to Patiala and all that, if that had happened, then I'm afraid we wouldn't have lived up another surprise properly. So it is good that our political and military minds and think tanks are thinking together. And let me give you a feeler of what happened after Galwan, since one was privy to a lot of suggestion making to the government that time.
Mm.
The government had challenges, right? Every government, any government, there's no strong, very strong or very weak government. Every government is a thinking government, and so is this one. And when they were looking for suggestions to do things, a lot of suggestions flew to them from many quarters. And in one of them, which went to them, and when I was referred to again on that, was that what would be the repercussion?
Mm.
Right? It was a very plain statement and question asked of me, that what would be the repercussion. So it took me time to tell them what the repercussions could be, and then I said that you have to, in this season, while you curry up all these forces which I'm alluding to, which have not been done till now in those terrain, is still possible. Try it. You have C-130s, you have the Tatras moving to a particular point along that axis. So while you do that, the repercussions are A, B, C, D, E. But if you don't do it, the beyond E repercussion, which is more internal in nature, is going to haunt you for a longer time. That
Yes.
is one.
Mm.
And secondly, it is going to give an advantage to China to do it at will in the coming years. So unless you pick up one of these 9 spots which I'm telling you to pick up and go on a little kind of a so-called occupation or offensive there, you're not going to be able to sustain the talk of a country, because the country is rallying behind for a particular aggressive cause. It doesn't want any more territory to go. It doesn't want people to have ingressions inside. Transgression is okay. It's LSE. Both sides do transgress. We also do. They also do. But any holding of ground will not be taken lightly. So similarly, if there is a particular hunch that they may not go back from finger 8, then how about doing something in the south? How about doing something further south towards the east? So those 8, 9 pockets were identified probably by the military, and I'm quite happy that the political decision makers listened to whatever the military minds had to say, those serving and those outside, and somehow we were able to curate a situation in which China felt the heat for the first time after many years. The last, I think, was when we fought in Chomchandru, that place. We fought well, and that was one bloody nose that time. And this time, Galwan was something which China did not expect at all. They didn't expect at all. They actually thought that post Galwan they'll be able to take over a little more transgressions here and there. It all stopped very fast, and this rapid mobilization, which I think started when somewhere in July, June it happened. July decision was taken. So by mid of August we were quite live to it, and I think the Prime Minister went to that sector to address troops that time with a lot of confidence. And the confidence did not come from any plain talk. It came from a large scale mobilization which had already gone through. And thanks to the Air Force and thanks to the ITBP, that even ITBP was able to reorient itself and occupy areas at short notice and then build up over that season. So something which was very, very good and very noticeable this time, Adi. So I think let's not trust China on any so-called disengagement. We should be prepared. See, disengagement is initially a political lip service, right? Both sides. It's a statement to say we are disengaging. Good. Yes. So we are disengaging to point A and point B. Very good. So we should go behind point A and point B with 25 kilometers. No, it doesn't work, because his 25 kilometers he will cover in 2 hours. Your 25 kilometers you'll cover in 3 days. So we can go only that much, which is specific and can be measured in time, not distance. So all the philosophies in mountains or any terrain has to be based on time, the time to reach a place, not the physical as the crow fly distance, because that is something which will not be correct for any discriminatory philosophy. And let's see where we go this season. My hunch is Pakistan will start very soon. Apart from all that talk it has done on the media and Imran Khan talking, so snow is melting there. So let's see what happens there. And by June, July, a little bit of posturing will happen along the LSE. We may not have a direct incursion this time because of the geopolitical weight we are currently carrying. So let's see closely that, and also the Chinese preparations are ongoing near Vietnam right now as we speak. Yes. So let's see where that leads to. Yeah, over to you, Adi.
So you mentioned the Depsang, which is one of the unresolved issues which is still there, and it's not something apart from what the general public thinks. It's not something that happened this year. It's been on for 2013 onwards. So it's close to 7.5 years, 8 years now that this so-called standoff has been on. Although it was not very heavily covered and stuff like that, but that doesn't mean it didn't exist. The interest towards all this stuff only is built up right now. My question to you is, the reason, as you mentioned, that we could clear up the Chinese from the Pangong Tso is because of the swift action that the Indian Armed Forces took. It was a battle of maneuver at the end of it. Do you think, and I'm not wanting to get into any specifics for obvious reasons, but do you think we are in a position of strength for maneuver in that particular area, looking at the terrain, which is basically a high-level flat ground? So do we have the advantage to negotiate with the Chinese when the time comes in the recent, now upcoming co-commander talks?
Right. So what is there in Depsang, let me put it as a layman itself. They have an advantage, right? The advantage stems from two things. The advantage stems from their current build-up in that particular sector, which is quite a substantial build-up. It also stems from their capability to push in forces a little faster in that area, right? So that's the advantage the adversary has in that particular sector. What is our criticality? Our criticality is that at no point of time or stretch we can let Depsang be a bygone, because DBO, your DSDBO access, routes to Siachen, and everything else hinges on this particular sector. So that's our criticality.
Hmm.
Now, are we in a position today, and say as the snow melts, to have a fight there? The answer would be the fight can only happen if the other side wants to fight. But the other side is very smart. The other side is not fighting you, right? The other side is only consolidating on the areas short of that area where it's already come and occupied. It's the Tibetan area. It has also had some transgressions into the other parts of Depsang. So how do you think that it's going to fructify into a, a situation in which we go and fight? So it's not for our country to see a fight there, but yes, should the fight come, and that is where the advantage will come to us and it will shift. So long as China is quiet and just maintaining its posture in wherever it is, and we are able to move around, with the exception of places where they don't let our patrols go beyond the bottleneck and beyond, and places where we also do not let them come in from the bottleneck and beyond.
I think, sorry, that is an underlying statement, sir. We don't and they don't. It's a combination, because most of the people feel that it's only one way.
No, it's never one way. It's never one way. Like I was telling on a TV channel, when and sorry to talk about it, because there was somebody from the polity wanted a proof of people killed in Galwan that time, and I asked him a question. I asked him, I said, I don't know what leanings you have politically, but militarily, let me tell you, say, what are you actually saying on a national television is that 20 of our young soldiers and warriors stood on a ledge and they told the Chinese, come one by one and give us a sock so that we can fall down and die. So is that your connotation of your army? No, it is not. So similarly, while the media knowledge, more so propaganda from Chinese side and less of that from our side. But whatever we do with our media and trying to convey our points and issues, we are not very offensive in nature to convey that. We are not. We don't go to any media as a military and tell them, please broadcast, we have gone and thrashed 20 more today. We don't take any kudos for that. If we have thrashed 20, we have thrashed 20. Those 20 know they've been thrashed, right? So similarly, when you talk about any patrolling access, it is not a one-way traffic, even in Depsang. So if we can't go to a particular place we thought we could, they also cannot come to a place where they think they could. So it's a status quo. My only fear is that on the garb of the status quo, what more can China do to facilitate its infrastructure development and troops build up? Because once the infrastructure is made, it is easier for him to get the troops. And once it's easier to get the troops, in the same season, he can do something stupid in terms of military action, right? That is the fear. So to negate the fear, only one thing is important, is that you are able to measure your mob differential. You have your troops ready. And today, with the kind of airlift capabilities which we have, and the ability to put both the regular infantry troops and also anti-aircraft units, or even put the mechanized units there, and you know the portable systems we have, which are air portable currently, which can also be underslung and put through Chinooks there. So all these assets are so viable. I just hope that these coming 2 seasons of summers, we do a lot of training and practice on those kind of deliveries. And I'm quite sure we are doing it in Rajasthan. I've done it myself. And similar, if you see the plane construction, but the altitude difference is there. So let's see if from Leh and Chandigarh we can plan these exercises and do it over a period of next 1 or 2 seasons. We should be a little more battle worthy and prepared.
Correct.
But at no point of time, Adi, should we have a feeling that like 1960s and 70s, China can do what it wants to do. It cannot. It cannot. The assets, even if they come till Depsang, and if you imagine what the Air Force can do today, the lift capabilities of our Air Force vis-a-vis Chinese coming from their hinterland, and the turnaround radius of those aircraft to operate, and the systems we have, I'm quite sure China is in no mood of any skirmish currently. But we should be warned. we should be warned. We should also develop that sector into a high priority military sector as of now. And in the next 3 years, we should be at a level of preparedness in Depsang in which we can take us any military eventuality at a very short notice. Today we have to prepare for it, but in 3 years' time, we should be there at any time and any notice period should be okay with us.
That's very interesting. And I actually completely agree with you, because at the end of it, it's going to be the preparation levels of the armed forces which is going to be able to create deterrence for the Chinese. And I'm sure the Chinese do watch us very carefully. I don't know how many of us actually do watch the Chinese, but not too overtly, but we do.
Just let me share one anecdote with you. You will appreciate it. The year was, I think, 2007 or 8, when I was the G1 of this 9 Independent Mounted Brigade group, right? The one which is touching your area with Nepal and China both. And that time, General VK was the Eastern Army commander, and he was made responsible for a study to do against China, and a lot of force accretions were recommended by him, and courtesy his approval and the chief that time. Finally, that particular sector has got an additional military brigade and a lot of air assets. Having said that, at that time, so a report came to me from the patrol, and this was somewhere between Joshimath and Dharchula, so one of those ranges going into the watershed with China, and it showed some sticks burnt along and some marks of cigarette packets and all that was seen. So petrol was still there. So I communicated. I said to the CO that, sir, you could please send somebody across. I want to see what distance and from where this is. What can you look into China? So they went in. They got back some information, and I was a young G1 there, fresh from staff college. So they teach you a lot of things to analyze and comment upon and do those hypothetical readings of what is happening. And I made my reading and put it in a situational report, a SITREP. Now, fortunately for me, the SITREP in 9I used to go under two parallel circuits. One was going through Lucknow, Central Command, and then to Army Headquarters with their commands, so UB area, Lucknow, and Delhi. And one copy used to go to MO1 directly, right? So whatever I bundled up there, it went to both. So morning 4 o'clock, I got a rollicking of my life from the GOC of that area, from UB area, an Armored Corps officer, great guy. And he lambasted me. He says, son, what have you written? So I said, sir, I have written that I presume two or three things. One is that if they're coming on a horseback, so they cannot come from now, today it is called GT219 or something, which is running parallel to Lincheng from there. So obviously that time that highway was not there. So I said from Dazongpa or Dapagong, two places there, I said these people in summers are coming closer to the watershed and making temporary settlements, doing all this in Barahoti, what they are doing at a free will, transgressing into Barahoti, and then now they are even stretching towards Nepal. So the hunch was they are creating small hutments next to the border, and I named three places there, just of the map study. I had not gone myself; nobody had traversed there. And I said the second thing I fear is that they are trying to make some kind of a road just across the watershed and along the watershed. So I had the firing of my life that, absurd, how can this happen? Just show it as a regular transgression and redo your report. Right? So I said, no. I have made a report based on my assessment of a young major. It stands. You want to change, you change it. You call it a transgression. I will not. So they called it a transgression, and by the time morning happened, 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock, Delhi must have opened MO. So I got a call from MO1. I said, son, what have you written again? So I explained to them. And they had some little more logic because MO was looking at the entire thing properly. But they said, we have never got this report in the sector for the last 30 years. I said, so be it. And by sheer ego, I got in touch with, he's retired, Colonel Roy. He was in the intelligence. I requested him for 2 boys. I says, I'll fund them. I'll give them spotter scopes. I'll give them whatever is required in cameras. They have to traverse 5 to 8 kilometers only along this ridge and get me these shots of both the sides and come back. So how do we induct? We said our civil agencies used to go for measuring of the area of Barahoti. There was a regular visit by the civil administration from our side to lay claim to Barahoti. So I inducted them with them. So Barahoti civilians came back and these 2 people went across. They came back after a few days. And lo and behold, Out of the three villages, two they could spot. The third one was beyond line of sight. Both villages had got Chinese camps. For 3.5 kilometers, which they could trace, they had done formation cutting along the watershed to make a road. And that is the way it came about that this sector is getting more active. And that is the way, Addy, we have been like that. Unfortunately, status quo, we talk about status quo anti with China, but we are too much into our own status quo. That status quo has to change, the mindset is change. You have to give it to the enemy, that the enemy is smart. I'll share one more joke with you. You understand DGMO? Is the highest military mind in military operations, sitting with us in the same headquarters after a few days. And Goodman has got a map, a beautiful laminated map, and is looking for tri-junction, right? So he can't find tri-junction. And because we are briefing him on tri-junction, but he can't correlate. So my commander walks up and he also starts looking into tri-junction. He can't find tri-junction. So then they look at the youngster who's supposed to be doing all the maps in the brigade. So I go to that map and I say, just show me the map, sir. So I see the map. I say, sir, you have gifted the tri-junction to the Nepalese. He says, what? I say, here. The map is here. He said, can't be. I said, I'll show you one more thing. Just give me the map. So I took the map, tore it from behind, and there, the cartography of that map in 2008-9 was made in China.
Oh, God.
Right? So I said, sir, China is trying to give maps and do cartography of Nepal, and you should be aware. And if they're going to do it for next 10-15 years, you're going to have a situation tomorrow that Nepal is going to lay claim on tri-junction and fight with you. It happened, I think, a few months back. Right? So the ability to be able to pick the adversary's mind, he will create every shindy possible with all your neighbors is a given. So it will continue. Don't think that today, if he stops with Nepal and Nepal talks sweet to you, the endeavor from Chinese side will go. It will never go. It cannot go. The elbow space is not physical. The elbow space is physical, psychological with nations, economically. That elbow space has to be created. So if you get that term correct, elbow space, China traditionally and quite diplomatically will create that elbow space to make sure that it has the advantage of the time to apply itself in all realms, military, economic, diplomatic, in cahoots with some other nation, it will try and do it. So we have to be prepared, and that is how the Chinese mind works.
I think what you said is really, really amazing. A multi-domain warfare. It's not a similar approach.
It is, Addy. Unless on the table you have all prongs of national security sitting together, you will never get the Chinese reading right. You will never get it. And I give you an example, a very crude example of how the military thought that time, transgression. So it's given, it was something normal that they will come into Baravati, they will go back. One fine day they were coming in horsebacks. One fine day they came with larger Tatra-like vehicles with antennas. And that is all when I was there for about 2.5 years. And we have the same, kind of a line, transgression. No, it's not transgression. China is coming with a Tatra now because that entire railway line has come up from Qinghai. The road that we call GT219 today, that time has gone about by 150 kilometers that time.
Yes.
And we're not even able to see through it. So if you are actually a Chinese, mainland China is far away. There's no capability of China to fight India from there. But Tibet, it has taken. And one of the strategic blunders geopolitically which we have done is we have not continued to name Tibet as Tibet, right? Even in military books, it is Tibet Autonomous Region, TAR. I don't know why. And that is the greatest blunder done by us in terms of naming a place. Never get cowed down or get mellowed by necessities of an adversary, which is temporary in nature, to be able to buy into its requirement. By not calling Tibet as Tibet, we have bought into the Chinese first requirement that on the geopolitical notion, it has set aside the quality of Tibet to a side, and now it assumes that it is Chinese territory. And since it assumes it's Chinese territory, it can militarily and in terms of infrastructure build up at will in that territory, right? Which is something which I think President Trump, towards the end of his tenure, tried to negate. try to call it a little different territory, but it has not played up beyond that. I'm quite sure geopolitics will start now again with other nations, taking the lead, and we might be just a mute spectator or say yes or no quite quietly. That is one mistake we did.
So, coming to our best friend Pakistan, what do you think is the meaning behind this peace overture? Is it pushed by China? Is it FATF? Or they've just lost the will to fight?
Who are these people who are making these overtures? One Imran Khan doesn't count at all. He's not leading Pakistan, right? He's just a messenger who's supposed to convey to people what the other side, the military wants. And is Pakistan a state which has been denuded of all the terrorist activities and terrorist hubs and tanzeems and whatever it has created? No. They call the shots. They go to jail like VVIPs, right? So there is a multi-pronged pressure on Pakistan. Pakistan is looking at the change of the US administration, and it has got a few supporters, there who are willing to accede to the request of Pakistan, and they want to get off that list. They want to have that economic ties growing and a lot of funds coming in, a lot of donations coming from here and there. So Pakistan is seeing a visibility across the tunnel that it might get back to the old ways to seek money from the US to start with. And for that to happen, if it makes the right noises with India, right, to show to the US that, see, we are very well meaning, see, we are doing this. So that is a sweet talk. Similarly, Pakistan is under tremendous pressure from the FATF. Enough has been provided against Pakistan by India itself, and it has been corroborated. The dossier was also presented post Balakot to even China by late, I think, Sushma Swaraj that time. So all that has happened. And Pakistan is feeling the second heat is FATF. The third heat is that inside Pakistan, there is a problem that the economic downfall has been so fast that they are not seeing any future currently to come out of it. They also have the other territories which they have tried to create mayhem in, including Baltistan and the Pashtuns and everybody else. It is biting them back. So if you see Pakistan is at no place to dictate anything to a country like India today. It is only trying to put wool over the eyes of the international committee to say that here Imran Khan is taking a stature to, talk peace with India. I mean, where was Imran Khan for the last few years? And what action have they taken which is definite on ground, which proves that the terrorist activities are not emanating from Pakistan? And not only across LC in Kashmir, 90% of the terrorist attacks happening in the world have got a Pakistani link.
Correct.
If not Pakistani link, it is got a Pakistan in Afghanistan link. So Pakistan is no sweet talker. And the next point which is trying to hide very, in a very smart way is Afghanistan itself. It doesn't know that how the destiny of Afghanistan will finally shape up with the current US administration. And if at all, India is going to do anything more than it is currently spoken about. There's a huge possibility. So talking nice one day and trying to curate an impression is something which Pakistan has done. Today only you have seen, probably I was seeing times now before this, they were showing all these, terrorist hubs getting rejuvenated and a lot of training going across the LC. So what is the training for? The training is for infiltrating terrorists into the country from the LC. So should India go by any such peace overtures? Yes, we must. They talk nice, we also talk nice, but be prepared. So when it comes to hit them hard. When it comes to hit them in their own territory, in the POK, hit them even harder. And that is the way forward. So doing one Balakot was good, but our messaging to Pakistan should be that whenever you do it, you will get it back. And that message has gone in two domains today. One is political domain, and one, if I remember correctly, Dr. Jaishankar also mentioned in some international fora when he was visiting abroad recently. He also mentioned, I think it was also conveyed in the UN, right? That we are going to give it back type kind of a message, and it is good. So when they talk nice, they want to have some biryani diplomacy. It's okay. It's just talk. What is the current government stand? The government official stand is that we will not talk to a state which exposes terrorism, and from its territory, terrorism comes into India. It also goes to the world, actually. So if that's the official stand, why should the military take any different stand? So overtures. So they had the first border meet. I don't know who came from their side. One brigade commander was from our side, standing in a photograph 2 days back. It's okay, but treat it as just a overture. They don't mean it. If they mean it, you will not have a single, LC crossing by a terrorist this year. But I'm quite surprised. It's already happened. It's already happening in Kashmir over the last 2 days.
Yes.
So it's okay. They talk nice to project their point to the world. You just talk nice, but do not try to reciprocate that necessity unnecessarily. Because our staunch belief today should be that you still have terrorist camps, you have terrorist funding, you have terrorist this, you have not done enough. And because you've not done enough, our original stand remains that we won't talk to you. That should be as simple a stand of our country today. But yes, politically, when people talk, or whenever our higher leaders in military talk, we can say, oh, we had a DGM to DGM interaction today. It's fine. You can say it publicly. There's no problem. But troops should be absolutely battle ready, and this season is going to be tough. I must say that infiltration is going to increase this season, and as we go along, you have seen the notation of these activities right from the time the hard line has been taken by the current government. I distinctly remember 2014 July, when then Defense Minister had come to Baramulla sector. I was there. The tenure of mine you were alluding to, and he went to this Spalton, and this Spalton was trying to tell, and they were having tea. So he was shown a Pakistani bunker or a post across the LC, and he says, "ये तो बहुत पास ही लग रहा है." So it is below us. It can be captured anytime. So general talk. He was not dictating any terms there. So a JCO said, "Sir, हुकुम होगा तो हम इसको कल सुबह तक ले लेंगे, बट हुकुम ही नहीं है, हुकुम तो हमारे तो हाथ बंधे हुए हैं." And then he turned around and looked at all the fogies in uniform till the top, and I think General Huda was standing there. And I believe people confessed. And then he made a statement as a defense minister that what is happening on the LC is military dominion. What you do here is your problem. What it escalates to might be a problem tomorrow, but you have to take all actions necessary as being mandated to you. And that time, Adi, and today, I'm quite sure the troops on the LC are the happiest, because they are taking no nonsense from Pakistan at all. Not at all. How many cases of beheading have you seen? Nothing. And there was a time, and quite unfortunately that time, when a beheading happened, and obviously you can understand what kind of you come from a belt of India where patriotism is very high. Can you imagine a CO or a commander getting a beheading, happening to his unit boys, taking it lying down and maturely to say, no, okay, it's fine. Can anybody do that? No. What would be the instinct reaction? The instinct reaction will be the same, that you will get 4 more heads from there, right?
Absolutely.
That's the way to look at it. I'm not saying that you have to do it every time, and every time it can be done probably. So somebody did it. Somebody did it, and to his peril, it came to a level in our military that they were questioned. Fortunately, the top man that time, in that era, who was the army commander, held their hand, and he said no inquiry, nothing. So you understand the dimension. The dimension is not limited to a military action. The dimension is also very deeply connected in our country somehow to the political liberties given to the military, the free hand. And that is very important. And that is why you see Pakistan has reached a level in the last few years. It has not been able to cope up militarily. It has not been able to dictate any terms. That bogey, nuclear, but 2 decades have gone in nuclear. What nuclear? What is the threshold? Coming and hitting you in Balakot, crossing the LC, we claiming it to be POK, but you were calling it something else in Pakistan. So how did it happen? So all these bogies have been created to limit our capability to give it back.
Yes.
And these are all necessities which work very well at the geopolitical realm, at the political realm, to get some backpacking from both sides. You're a good leader, I'm a good leader. It doesn't work militarily. If I could gauge 2 decades ago that this nuclear bogey is a bogey, and there is no threshold which can be limiting you in your actions, because what? Today, Pakistan doesn't have the capability to fight for even 4 days. Its war waging capability is abysmal, compared to any time. And this 4 days was about a couple of years back. I'm quite sure it must be reduced. So I was joking with somebody when Shri Parikar was alive, when I had the opportunity of meeting him once over breakfast. And I told him a very sensible, joke that time. And I said, sir, you don't have to fight Pakistan. You can win away Pakistan. It will crumble militarily. He said, how? He said, sir, our economy, say he's got a 100 rupee economy to fight you. We've got a 1 lakh worth economy. That's the disparity of our economy. So if in this economy, we are on the LC, how about just firing one bullet every day towards Pakistan and make it fire four in return towards you? In a matter of few years, the ammunition will dry. And when that ammunition is drying, all you need is diplomatically cut the funding from UAE, Saudi Arabia, bulldoze Qatar, cut the relations with the US in a way that it's a terrorist state. Do all that and make it all come together. And you will find Pakistan will be like a small pup and staring at you and be able to do nothing. It's feasible. It is almost done. And that is the point from where, Adi, I say that Pakistan, we have done enough. We have overinvested our resources and energy. Time has come to be very sure what is to be allocated in terms of a contingency there. Time has come to have nuanced, reactions done, rehearsed, approved for anything which happens in the season of the terrorist infiltration from Pakistan side. And if we can do that, we have the capability, we have the intent, we have everything. It's just the intent and application to be done. I'm quite sure if we start this philosophy this year, by next year, Pakistan will have nothing to talk about militarily at all. So that is our strength.
I think so. If you're talking about it, there's somebody already thinking about it as well. So I'm sure there is some work on this. So I have loads of other questions, but I guess I would have to request you for another time as well, because the very thought-provoking talk that we've had right now has brought about some very practical points that most of the writers and talkers have kind of omitted, because at the end of it, it is more a posturing game, and the Chinese have been very good at it. The Pakistanis have played their cards well, but they, because of their internal
Chinese are not only good at it, Chinese also control a lot of things.
Yes.
Their infiltration in WHO is quite visible. The way they have infiltrated WTO. So they are the ones who have taken advantage of all the policies, right from being a developing nation to keeping that tag for the longest time today, to be able to infiltrate agencies and world bodies, to be able to have systems in which favorable decisions can be taken for yourselves. They have been good. They have been good. It's just now that they are at a position that they can be called out. And that is where the Chanakya Niti comes into play. Don't have to talk about it. Just keep doing it with the others, and you will find that China will eventually understand from which advantage are you speaking, and that is more important. You have to gain that strategic advantage as a country in all realms. Military being the last, because military, even if the ratio is in favor of China, say on a particular piece of ground today, even if the ratio is abysmal 10:1, still there is a fight in the dog which will make sure that it doesn't come beyond a point.
Absolutely.
But
yes.
if the other realms are controlled, that those are the strategic threads which you have to control China, and if you can control them there, in a much brighter military position in the next couple of decades, and that is what we should look at.
Sir, I'd like to thank you so much for this time today. It's been a wonderful talk over two of our biggest, opportunities and threats. I'd put it like that: the Pakistanis and the Chinese. I'd like to take some more time to discuss the Bangladesh,
Anytime.
Myanmar,
Anytime.
and the other geopolitical, issues that India is faced with today. So thank you once again, sir. And I must say, this has been a very thought-provoking session, and I'm sure whoever's going to watch this is going to have similar thoughts that are coming into my head as well.
See, we must have a lot of thoughts coming to our youth. My entire aim of coming on such shows is not to address any military dominion. We are all done and dusted kind of people. But if the youth can start thinking And I'm quite sure many of these youth will join the military. More than that, many of these youth will go into bureaucracy and polity of the country tomorrow.
Yes.
And that is where the meshing is required. So if you can mesh the thoughts together today as they grow, I'm quite sure if they carry these thoughts, they carry the concerns, they carry the challenges which people like us enunciate, they carry the recommendation which we make. I'm quite sure the ability to take a decision holistically will be much better in the generation after us. So that is the aim.
Right, sir. I agree with you 100%. I think it's going to be the talking that is going to start the entire process.
Take care, Adi.
Thank you, sir. Have a good evening, and thank you so much for joining me once again.
Bye, Adi. Jai Hind.